Good evening, friends. Hate to break up all the fine fellowship. Time is now 6 o'clock p.m. Today's date is June 2nd, 2015, and it's time to call our meeting to order. Before we do that, we'd like to ask that you silence your cell phone. Board members, if you would turn off your cell phone and your vibration due to the microphones. Anyone who would like to address the board at the end of public comments and concerns section, we ask that you get a comment card out of the foyer area and fill it out for myself or Ms. Pennington or any other board member of your choice, and they'll bring it up to us. I'm going to try. I want to apologize. I do have a cold, so you guys have to bear with me. I'm going to lead the invocation to pledge this evening. Please rise. Our Lord God, we just ask that your Spirit be upon the proceedings here this evening. We ask that you help us to make decisions that are wise and good in your eyes, and we just pray that you watch over those of us who are sick and afflicted, and those of us who couldn't be with us here tonight for various reasons. We ask that you go home, help us to get home safe this evening as we leave here, and we just leave this meeting in your care and keeping. It's in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome one and all to our meeting here this evening. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of County Commissioners for Suwannee County. There's a few items that need to be pulled here this evening. Items number, if you notice on your agenda, items number 19 and 20 will be pulled to be considered at another meeting. We also would like to pull the meeting minutes on item number 1 from May 5th, 2015, regularly scheduled board meeting. That will also be brought back for the board to consider at a future date. But without further ado, item number 1. We have the minutes for May 19th, 2015 for the regularly scheduled board meeting of the County Commissioners. Gentlemen, are there any changes or corrections that you would like to make in those minutes? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion to approve made by Commissioner Fleming, seconded by Commissioner Gamble. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Moving on to the consent agenda. Gentlemen, I have no items to pull off the consent agenda. Are there any that you would like pulled for individual consideration? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve items 2 through 12.
Mr. Chairman, I approve the consent items 2 through 12 to be approved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Sessions, seconded by Commissioner Fleming. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Moving on to constitutional officers' items. There are none scheduled. There were none added. But are there any constitutional officers here this evening that would like to speak? Seeing none, move on to proclamations and presentations. None were noted on the agenda or none were added. Are there anything that any commissioner would like to add at this time? Hearing none, that brings us to time-specific items, but the time is 6:04 p.m., and we will revisit the items 13, 14, and 15 at the appropriate time. Moving on to commissioner items, none were noted on the agenda, none were added. Commissioners, is there anything that you would like to add at this time?
I just have one comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Sessions.
This Saturday is the Blueberry Festival in Welborn. Everybody's invited to show up. I'm sure it'll be a very good thing for everybody. There will be parking at the Welborn Baptist Church and shuttle in between the church and the park.
Thank you, Commissioner Sessions. The Blueberry Festival is always a good time. We'll be sure to try to be there. Moving on to county attorney items, none were noted, none were added to my knowledge. Mr. Attorney, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Moving on to general business, looking at your agenda, item number 16. I'll read it. Discuss with possible board action improvements to 29th Road. We'll hear from Mr. Greg Bailey of North Florida Professional Services, and also Mr. Harris if need be. We'll give our attention now to Greg Bailey.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The county was awarded a SCOP project for 29th Road. 29th Road is about 3.1 miles. It's a dirt road on the eastern side of the county, connecting County Road 252 and US 90. The program is to pave that road. As we started looking at it, we've got some concerns. We're kind of looking for some board direction. Most of the time when you're doing these type projects, a lot of times they're resurfacing where you got an existing paved road. It's a lot simpler project. When you start a dirt road to a paved road, it's a little more complicated. Currently out there, you've got maintained right-of-way width of approximately 40 feet. Basically from ditch to ditch. You've got a small ditch. We do have a number of major cross drains that traverse the road itself. One's a 54-inch CMP at one location. At a second location, we have two 54s, and then at a third location, we have three 54s. When we go to pave the roadway, typically our lane widths are at a minimum of 20 feet. That's a normal state minimum, and it's also your required minimum as part of your LDRs. If we do that, that's 20 feet. That leaves us basically 10 feet on either side for drainage, which is not very much room. Typically, we have a shoulder and at least a 2-foot deep ditch. You're typically looking at 4-to-1 slopes, so you're looking at another additional 22 to 24 feet out there beyond your edge of pavement. So you see, when you start totaling all those numbers up, we're on the order of needing about 60 feet if you construct a standard roadway section through there, where we only have 40 feet. The question is, does the county prefer to acquire right-of-way, or do you prefer to pave the road? Let's do the best we can, which means you won't have the most optimum drainage situation out there, but the road will be paved. The other issue to think about when we pave it, you will see some increased speeds on the road as drivers sense a better roadway condition. They tend to drive what they feel safest at or what they feel appropriate more so, and that a lot of times does not correlate necessarily with what a speed limit sign says. So that's pretty much it. What we were looking at right now, there's a signed speed limit out there about 35 miles an hour. Typically we design them for 5 miles over, which would put us at a design speed of 40. There is one hill on the project site that's fairly steep. Has some drainage problems at the past. We did talk to some of the people in the road department, and they informed us that there was quite a bit of rubble buried along the edges of the roadway there to try to stabilize those ditches in that area that would have to be dealt with as we move forward with this project. But, that's kind of in a nutshell what we're looking at. Mr. Harris, if you want to add anything to it, but we're kind of looking for some direction. Obviously, if you start looking at right-of-way, that affects project schedules. So those are all issues we need to kind of iron out.
Mr. Harris, you have anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would just say that historically, this is a problem road because of flooding. Clearly, we do not have enough money to go in there and start buying right-of-way. We just don't have what it would take to accomplish what we would love to be able to accomplish. But it's best that you be well informed before we consider going in there and paving that road and fitting everything within the right-of-way that we have, if that's what we are going to do. We could anticipate some problems in the future. But then again, even with 60 foot of right-of-way, we may have problems in the future in that area. or even 100-foot wide. I mean, it is a very bad wet area. It's just, and it's, like I said, there's a history of that out there. So we can proceed, we can build that paved road, try to fit everything within what we had a similar situation with Hughes when we built it. It was very narrow, and you look at those steep ditches out there that were crammed into a narrow right-of-way. We haven't had problems out there. We don't have the water issues as significant as we do on 29th. But as long as you're well informed before we proceed with this thing, that was the important thing. I don't want you to have a road get completed because DOT's funding it and come 3 years out, someone's asking, well, why in the world couldn't we take care of all these water problems at the time? We don't have the money to do it. Quite frankly, if we had plenty of money, I'd say let's buy more right away, and then let's buy in more than one location, some large areas to build some drainage retention areas. But we don't have it, and I wanted you to be well informed of that before we go ahead. We do have the funding to build the road. I'm confident that Mr. Bailey and his staff can ensure that we meet all the permitting requirements. But you know what happened just a couple years ago with that storm? All of our roads went out. Didn't matter how well they were designed or what we designed for. We're just prone to that in this area with our the clay. But anyway, we actually brought it to you to say, if you want to buy right away, we'll slow the project down, get an extension of time, and turn Mr. Pravat loose. My belief is, though, that it would be cost prohibitive because we really do not have the funding. We don't have any excess funds to buy that kind of right away. That's a significant amount. Try to jump up to 60 feet or more.
I mean, there's several examples down in the south end. I mean, even Market Road. Market Road is a heavily traveled highway, and the first couple of miles there when you turn to the east off of 129, that's a narrow right-of-way with small ditches. The old Ross Road, I can't think of the number on that one. That's the same way. There's huge trees, and it's
Market Road, 216.
yeah, but there's another road, Ross Road, on down just to the east of Branford. Same thing. There's, as necessity would dictate in some cases, I don't see a problem with it. Yes, we would, as you indicated, it would be preferable to have it wider, but they have served well for many years, and they function fine, and I'm okay with leaving it as it is, proceeding forward.
With my situation, since it's in my district, I've talked to quite a few of the people on the road, and their biggest concern is the drainage. We got to get that right best we can. I don't think all of them would donate land, but I think some would. But there are probably others that would ruin it for others, you know. And I know we don't probably have the time to take a survey of who would and who wouldn't at this point in time, but I just think we do a good job with the, you know, with the engineering as far as the drainage.
That's my point. There's
Yeah.
not room to do a lot.
Right, but I mean, you
Really
know,
not really much to do anything to improve the drainage whatsoever. We're gonna maintain status quo is what we're gonna
yeah,
end up
but
doing.
it's gonna, instead of running into the road, it's gonna run under the road in those big locations. And, you know, that's the consensus I've been getting, is that they really want it paved, and we've talked about even the speed on it and everything else. Some are concerned about the speed, which I said, if you get it paved, that's what's gonna happen. But it's been, the biggest issue's been drainage. I'll reach out to some people this week, but I don't, you know, I think we could just go ahead and move forward. If something changes, I don't think everybody's gonna donate to help widen it, but, you know, it'd be nice if they would, but I'd like to move forward with the project, and I'll talk to some people in the early stages.
Okay. Anybody else?
So the north end of that road runs into 90. It floods on that end quite a bit, don't it?
Well,
There's not you're on top of the hill, and it's kind of a flat hill right there, but there's no ditch really to speak of right there.
it's when it
That's where your
comes,
flooding comes from.
it's when it comes off that hill, going toward 252, that
Right.
steep hill he's talking about, that's the worst part.
But-
And that's in the first 3/4 of a mile or mile
Yeah,
down there.
that's where I'm talking about, but
That's the area where the county's spent a lot of time
Even with
rubbing in that area.
more right-of-way and doing some, if you add another 20-foot of right-of-way, you're still gonna have a flooding issue there, aren't you? I don't see correcting it, if it, the best I can remember.
I think you'd need an area to put you need 5 or 10 acres there for a big pond.
Yeah, I mean, it gets pretty deep right
Yeah,
here.
to address any adjacent property, you need to deal with retention areas. The only way you're gonna do that. The other part of drainage is protecting the roadway itself.
Yeah.
And, you know, that area would be more, any drainage features we put in there would be to protect the roadway than it would be to protect adjacent property.
Because we don't want to wash out the side of the road.
Right.
I'm for sticking with what we got. I've noticed over in Madison County and in Lafayette County, they've done a lot of paving here lately that's been just the dirt roads and just a paving the existing road right away that they have. And they've had some water issues on them flooding, but they've overall been pretty successful.
We wanted to bring it before the board because, you know, if we had plenty of right-of-way, there's a lot of things you can do, you can take care of. We don't want anybody to second guess later on, you know, could we or should we? We want to, you know, go ahead and make that decision now.
I'm good with it.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your comments. What are the wishes of the board?
I make a motion and we move forward with the project.
Motion made by Commissioner Sessions.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Gamble. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, moving on to item number 17, discuss with possible board action approval of insurance committee's selection of health insurance companies. We'll turn our attention to Randy Harris, County Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we produced a request for proposals and sent it out. Got a number of responses back, and I think each of you received the packet with the information. This was assembled to provide comparisons and hopefully to answer most of the questions that many of you would have. The insurance committee met and went through the information, talked about some of the key features and the responses, and in the end made a recommendation, actually voted to make a recommendation to the board that we continue doing business with Florida Blue as a provider of our health insurance. Now, this recommendation also includes a recommendation to go ahead and include with Florida Blue, which is Blue Cross, the utilization of our ProShare and wellness program funds that are given to the county each year. Essentially, they would write us a check for $200,000, and that would be applied so that we are essentially buying down our premium and continuing to do business with them. And the net result of that is that we would not experience an increase overall in next year's cost of providing health insurance for employees. In fact, there's a memo that I had included that's in your agenda packet as well that indicates that we could experience approximately a $13,000 reduction. And I think that's very good news. If you think about it, the current year, we realized when we renewed last year for this year, we realized about I think it was a 4.7% reduction in our insurance premiums over the prior year. We spend a tremendous amount of time working on insurance, and I tell you, I want to applaud Tyson. He works very closely with me. I know he answers a lot of questions for commissioners. I know that several of you have contacted him on a regular basis, but I spend a great deal of time with him on the telephone and in the office and working with our staff trying to keep the cost of insurance as low as we can. I think it was very helpful to undertake this RFP process, though. It allowed us to get a feel for what other providers around the state are willing to offer in the way of premiums for insurance. Some of these, as you realized in your packet, were very difficult to try to compare apples to apples because some of the companies did not respond in the format that we had requested they respond in so that we could make those comparisons. Some of them altered the time frames that they were supposed to use in order to create premiums based on historic claims. So there were lots of little variations that were offered. I thought we had very good responses from the companies. Clearly, they were not all, apples to apples, though. But in the end, the insurance committee's recommendation is that we renew with Florida Blue and utilize the ProShare funds and the wellness funds and apply that toward the cost of the insurance for the next year.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Are there any questions by the board members? Hearing none, what are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion to approve made by Commissioner Wainwright, seconded by Commissioner Fleming. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Let's move on to item number 18, discuss with possible board action, insurance coverage at Freight Depot. Turn our attention back to Randy Harris, County Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this is a very interesting topic. We discovered a week or two ago that our passenger depot did not have insurance on it. Although we knew that we were paying for insurance for a depot. So when we researched that, we found out that we were paying insurance on the freight depot instead of the passenger depot. And apparently this has been going on for many, many years. The county commission does not own the freight depot. The county commission have the passenger depot. So we immediately insured the passenger depot and inquired of the clerk's office as to whether or not there was an existing agreement somewhere recorded in official records indicating that the county commission had agreed at some time in the past to pay for the insurance on the freight depot. We have not been able to obtain any documents that indicate that there was an agreement by the county commission to pay for that insurance. And the only thing that in fact, just today it dawned on me that if it, actually a few days ago, and I haven't called Paula yet to inquire about this, but the only other thing I could think of was that if a conversation occurred, it may have occurred during a budget workshop in the past sometime, because otherwise we can't find an agreement. So if there are minutes of a workshop somewhere where commissioners agreed to pay for that insurance for the freight depot, then we can search for that and see if we can find it. But otherwise, in the other minutes of all the discussions and all the agreements, there's nothing that indicates that the county commission is going to pay for that. I want to bring it to your attention. It isn't normal for a county commission to be paying for insurance on a building that it doesn't own. And ultimately, you're going to have to make a decision. Clearly, we know that the group that operates the museum doesn't have the finances to just run out tomorrow and stroke a check to pay for this insurance. So if the board desires, I'll communicate with them, let them know what's going on. I don't know, if the board just wants to continue doing this. In the interim, we can try to research any minutes of old budget workshops to see if an agreement was made and try to find that in the next 2 weeks, bring it back on the next agenda. The cost of that insurance for the building is $750 a year, $225 per year for the contents. And actually the insurance on the passenger depot is considerably more than that. But in any event, that needed to be brought to your attention. The passenger depot that the county does own is now insured, but the freight depot is, again, we've paid that premium and have been for many years. So we can bring you more information back and unless you want to give us some direction to do otherwise right now. It's up to you.
I have a question.
Commissioner Wainwright?
Which, is it the historical or the museum that we have an agreement with the city that we, in our budget workshops where, there's some kind of agreement between the city and the county where we both contribute to that particular entity? You remember?
And at the Historical Commission,
Yeah, it's,
yeah.
Okay, so that has nothing to do
I
with
think
this
it's part
freight.
of the
It's
expenses.
I think it's who owns the particular building right now. You make a contribution to them. I mean, a joint contribution to be given to
Historical.
the Historical.
Right, okay. I knew there was, I didn't remember which one it was, but both the city and the county contribute to that particular organization. And so apparently they haven't addressed the insurance with that funding. And that's what, basically what
I
you're
don't have any
saying.
knowledge of
No
it.
knowledge of it. Okay.
And we looked at some, I think one of those was titled an interlocal agreement that I went through, and I couldn't find it.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Wainwright. How did we figure this out? How did this all,
Honestly, I can't remember. Carissa and I were doing something in the office 2 or 3 weeks ago. I can't remember what it was that brought this up.
What brought it up was
Probably the
excuse me,
contract.
if I may interrupt,
no, it's
when we were talking about leasing or having the museum
Oh, the expense.
association.
Expenses.
Remember, you got
That's right.
Museum
That's what it was.
Association, look at handling operations for the passenger depot. And I was trying to find, what all the expenses would be associated with, because I was requiring y'all were requiring insurance requirements for them, and everything. And so I was gathering all the information on the insurance requirements, and I found out that we weren't insuring the passenger depot.
When we went in to see what we were paying so we could determine what that expense would be, if they picked it up, we realized that there's nothing to pick up. It'd be a great deal if they picked up the rate that we were paying, because we weren't paying anything. The building was uninsured.
At the very least, they need to be informed that they don't have insurance. They need to be made aware of it. I don't,
well,
Well,
that's
it does now, don't, didn't you say y'all covered it now?
It is insured.
it's a significant,
Freight is insured. Freight depot
oh,
and.
it is.
both of them.
Okay,
both
both
of
of
them.
them.
Both
So
of
you
them are
didn't, we
insured.
didn't
We haven't
eliminate
canceled
that.
anything.
Okay, okay.
No, we haven't canceled anything, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. We can try to see if there's something in some old minutes of those budget workshops, but so far in all of the other discussions and minutes, we haven't been able to find anything.
We just need to address this at the budget workshop. We're almost there, so
Yeah, that's what I was leaning towards.
just let it go till then, and we'll approach it.
we don't,
That's what I think we need to do.
how many years did we pay for the insurance?
Well, we've asked that question, and we don't have that answer yet. They're having to track that back.
Significant contribution.
It's actually through the League of Cities, and Mr. Harvard sent that request to them to see if that determination can be made.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that there's a lot going on here, and at some point in time, we need to address this as a board as to what the relationship is and who owns the building, who takes care of it and stuff. I think there is some, I don't know who does the maintenance out there, Mr. Harris, who does the maintenance on the building? I'm talking about the freight depot, I guess the freight depot.
I
But
don't
not us?
I don't have
It's
any
not that
idea.
one.
The Historical Commission and the museum, I mean, they do all of it.
But the inmate labor, they don't go out there with inmate labor to do the grounds
I don't know
maintenance
about that, I
and
just
stuff
put
like
like
that.
building maintenance, roof.
All right.
They pay for it.
Well, there's a lot here that probably needs to be worked out. Maybe we should put it on a regular scheduled meeting, or we need to workshop it or something like that to figure out what to do with this situation.
Mr. Chairman, I think honestly, we ought to just take care of the budget workshop when we go to dig into all that stuff. I mean, it's already done now, it's been paid for, and still is, just,
With the sooner you get that.
we can have some clarity by then.
All right, I'll consider that. So we're taking no action on this at this time. Is that my interpretation of what we've been saying here?
Yeah, I'm going to bring it back at budget workshops.
Okay. All right, we ended that just right. You guys did just right. 6:31 p.m. We're going to move back up to our time-specific items. Item number 13 is at 6:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter can be heard. Consider adoption of resolution approving special permit number SP-15-06-01 by Alexander Boligan to be granted a special permit under section 14.6 Suwannee County Land Development Regulations for intensive agriculture to construct 8 poultry houses on property zoned agricultural 1 or A1. At this time, I'd like to open public hearing on this matter. We're going to turn our attention over to Mr. Ron Meeks, Planning and Zoning Director. Mr. Meeks?
Thank you. At this time, if there's anyone that anticipates they may speak for or against this particular item, would you all stand to be sworn, please? Seeing none, Mr. Meeks? You swear or affirm the testimony you give in the public hearing before this board this evening will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, board members, the application request that you have before you is a special permit request number SP-15-06-01. The request is to construct 8 43 by 510 poultry houses on a piece of property that is zoned agricultural 1. The subject property is currently an active poultry farm, which I believe has existing 5 poultry houses on it now. Part of a 60-acre parcel located in Section 23, Township 2 South, Range 11 East. The property is located in the Louisville area off of 209th Road. Subject property is zoned agricultural 1. There is no special flood hazard areas on the subject property. The site plan does indicate that the required setbacks off the property lines would be met with the addition of these proposed poultry houses. As our LDRs dictate the findings portion of special permits, the first one addressed their ingress and egress to the property is off of 209th Road, which is a county-maintained graded road. Off-street parking and loading areas are existing on-site as it is an active poultry farm. Refuge and service areas are provided for on-site. Utilities are existing. With the proposed additional 8 poultry houses, there may have to be some modifications with electrical, and necessary permits would be obtained for that. Signs located on the property owners who live on the property currently have an existing sign that states the name of the farm. Required yards and other open spaces is being met in that the required 300-foot setback that the LDRs require is indicated on the site plan. Conformity with the county's comprehensive plan, the comprehensive plan and land development regulations allow for agricultural usage within the agriculturally zoned district of the county and allow for poultry houses as an intensive ag operation to be permitted in those areas. The existing land use pattern is agricultural. There are several agricultural operations in the area. Impact upon the proposed use upon public facilities should be minimal, and impact upon drainage should be minimal as well. Like I said, the property is currently acting as a poultry farm, so the existing conditions should not change. At this time, I'll enter the file into the record, and you have before you a proposed resolution for approval if the board decides to approve the request.
Thank you, Mr. Meeks.
I'll take the file in as composite exhibit number 1
Thank you.
for the record. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Mr. Meeks?
I have-
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions for Mr. Meeks to
Mr.
clarify a
Labatt.
couple of issues. Mr. Meeks, is there going to be any particular effect of having the additional chicken houses that would have effect on the light or the area and the adjacent areas around it?
None that is known.
Are you aware of any effect that the addition of the chicken houses on this existing chicken house farm would have on the property values in the adjacent area?
No, sir.
No effect?
None that I'm aware of.
All right. by adding the additional chicken houses, does the chicken farm remain in scale with the proposed agricultural use in that A1 area?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pravat. Any questions of the board? Are there any questions of the public for staff? Hearing none, I'll open public comment at this time. Seeing none, I'll close public comment at this time. We ask that, what is the wishes of the board? Or actually, this is the first of two public hearings, I'm sorry.
No, this will be.
Okay.
This is it.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Wainwright, seconded by Commissioner Gamble. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. This time, we'd like to close the public hearing on this matter.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. All right. Move back up here. Item number 14, at 6:30 PM or as soon as thereafter as the matter can be heard. Presentation by Fred Fox Enterprises on Suwannee County's Fair Housing Ordinance and Federal Fair Housing Statutes. We'd like to welcome up at this time Mr. Fred Fox, President of Fred Fox Enterprises.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank the commission for selecting our firm to prepare your CDBG application this year. We're going to go into this, and then from this into the first public hearing. DEO requires that we do sign-in sheets for both, so I'm going to pass around 2 sign-in sheets and ask that the individuals in the audience sign both of them. The county first passed a fair housing ordinance on January 25th of 1988. And in that ordinance, basically, the county said they would not allow discrimination based upon someone's race, their color, their religion, their ancestry, their place of birth, the fact they're physically handicapped, or their national origin. And then you followed that up with a second ordinance that you passed on December 4th, 1990, which added familial status and age as 2 other protected areas. The fair housing regulations at the federal level were actually initially passed in 1968. They were then amended in 1988 and then again in 1995. And basically, it's the same classifications as the county has. This applies to people that either are in the real estate business and selling residential properties, single family, or are mortgage brokers or rental agents for rental complexes. It only applies to those that deal with more than 3 units a year. If you have 3 units or less that you deal with, typically they're units owned by you, that would exempt you from this ordinance. If someone felt they had been discriminated against, they can file a written complaint both locally and at the state and federal level. I have packets available with me if anybody thinks they've been discriminated against. Also, the county administrator has packets that he can give you, which are the same packets, that basically give you who to contact at HUD, it's in the Atlanta office, and also some samples of how to write your letters and what should be in the complaint. And if anybody would like a packet, I'll be glad to give it to you this evening, or you can request it from the county staff at a later date. And with that, I'll answer any questions on fair housing anybody might have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we'll conclude this workshop at this time. Then we don't have to vote on anything specific on this. We'll move on to item number 15. Let's see. It's a time-specific matter as well. 6:30 p.m. as soon thereafter as the matter can be heard, hold a public hearing to discuss community development block grant funds for housing rehabilitation and economic development programs. And Mr. Fred Fox is still,
Basically, the Community Development Block Grant Program is
Excuse me, Mr. Fox.
Yes.
For the moment, we'll note for the record that it is a public hearing, and we're opening the matter for public hearing. If there's anybody that anticipates being able to testify or to give comment or whatever, again, since it is a public hearing, I offer you the chance to be sworn before you testify before the board.
does he need to be?
Okay, and Mr. Fox will have to also be sworn. Seeing none, Mr. Fox?
Hey.
Do you swear?
I'm going to swear too. Go
Oh,
ahead.
you're going to swear too?
Yeah.
All right. You're going to swear at you, swear to, swear, okay, all right. All right. Do each of you now, the three of you, swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give before the board this evening during the public hearing will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Carry on.
Basically, the Small City CDBG program is a component of the larger Community Development Block Grant Program that's funded through federal HUD. Larger cities, cities over 50,000, and counties over 200,000 get funds directly from HUD. Smaller cities and counties get funds through a pool that HUD gives to the state, and in Florida, that pool goes to the Department of Economic Opportunity. The state has set up a new rule starting this year with some changes, not a whole lot, but some. And also the community-wide need scores have reset. There are 4 categories that the county can apply in. The first is housing rehabilitation, and I know that's the one you're looking at. Basically, in housing rehabilitation, you're typically going to commit to go after the $750,000, which is the amount that the county can apply for, which the amount you can apply for varies based upon your low moderate income population as of the 2010 census. Small communities with less than 500 low moderate income people are eligible for $600,000. Between 1,250 and 3,999 low moderate income people, they're eligible for $650. And between 1,250 and 3,999, they're eligible for $700,000, and above 4,000 and above, which you are, you're eligible for $750,000. So if you see different ads for different amounts, that's the reason. In the housing category, for each home that you address, you're required to correct all the code violations. And typically, the number you would need to do to, again, be competitive in the competition would be at least 11 homes, which is a good number for this. That basically, the homes could be located anywhere in unincorporated county. You are limited to unincorporated county. Both Live Oak and Branford can apply on their own behalfs for funding. Typically, what you would do is pass a housing assistance plan. We provided a draft of that to staff, who I think has circulated that to some degree. We'll be coming back at the next council meeting and asking for you to make any changes you want to it, but it needs to go in as an approved document with the application. The applications are due 22nd of this month, so we're sort of on a tight time frame moving down the road. But at least 2 of the homes would have to be occupied by extremely low-income people. An additional 3 homes would have to be, which is 30% of median income. An additional 3 homes would need to be occupied by low-income people, which is 50% of median income, and then the remaining 6 homes could be occupied by people making up to 80% of median income. And typically, the way we manage a program is that we would work with you to take applications both through a public notice and through contacting different agencies like Council on Aging, groups that would deal typically with people that might be in position to need their homes done. They have to be owner-occupied properties. They have to be in residence of the property when they submit when we submit the application on your behalf. And then we'll go through your citizens group to rank those clients and bring them back to you for a final approval of those rankings. And then we'll check basically that they meet the income criteria, number 1, and number 2, they have good title of the property. And then we would go about working with your building department to determine whether they were a replacement house or to be rehabilitated based upon the building department's interpretation of the Florida code. And basically that is how we would manage a housing program and how you would have your housing program. The second option would be a commercial revitalization program. That's streetscape improvements similar to what you see in downtown Live Oak. Typically, they're within community redevelopment areas. You don't really have any of those in the unincorporated county, so while it's an option, and they only fund a couple of projects a year. It really isn't an option for the county. The third is neighborhood revitalization, and that is typically public works kind of projects. Road paving in low moderate income areas. For each $9,000 that you're requesting, you want to basically be benefiting one low moderate income household. So if you're going to pave straight roads, it's got to be in an area that's congested enough where you're going to get enough households that are low income. And at least 51% of the households in the area that you select need to be low income to qualify. If you had a water system that needed upgrading that was, again, in unincorporated county and served primarily low moderate income people, that would be eligible as a good neighborhood revitalization project. Typically, a community center would be a neighborhood revitalization project. A fire station would be a neighborhood revitalization project. So those are some of the things you can do under neighborhood revitalization. And in those three categories, housing rehabilitation, commercial revitalization, and neighborhood revitalization, you apply for, you receive a grant, you're not eligible to apply in any of those again until you close out that grant, and it's administratively closed by the state. Fourth category, which is what you do with Klausner's, is economic development. Under the new rule, the amount that you can apply for without a waiver has gone from $750,000 to $1,500,000. For every $34,999 that you're requesting, the business has to be creating one full-time equivalent new permanent job. And you can actually apply for one of those every year as long as your other projects are on schedule and you don't have any grants that had reached the point where they're 3 years old and still open. So those are the categories. And then in economic development, again, you can apply for one a year, even if you have an open grant in one of the other categories. So that basically is a program in a very quick nutshell. Be glad to answer any questions anybody has on the program.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Are there any questions of the board or of the board attorney? Hearing none, are there any public questions from the public? Mr. Fox. At this time, I'd like to open public hearing on this matter.
Public comment.
Public comment, sorry. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We're not going to take any action at this time. We will take action at the next meeting, I assume.
I think you've got basically what we're looking for this evening is some direction. The process is going to be this evening, if you want to direct us to work with staff and whatever engineering firms we need to deal with to develop an application in one or more specific categories, then we'll hold a second public hearing at a future meeting in which we'll go over the information in the application in detail.
Okay.
But we need direction tonight on a category. The citizens group met last night. I don't know if you've got the minutes from that meeting yet or not.
Yeah, we
but
have.
They recommend that you basically proceed with an application in the housing category and that you proceed with the second application in the economic development category for the second phase of the sawmill.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Harris.
if I could just elaborate a little bit. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Fox. You're talking about an excellent choice. We selected someone that was already up and running and doesn't have a learning curve. I mean, he knows all the dates and all the numbers and everything it takes to qualify for these things. Some of you may recall that we had discussed the fact that we might make the selection but not make it in time to actually apply in this cycle. We thought that we may even be pushed in the next cycle of application before we could begin the process, other than making our selection. But Mr. Fox came in well prepared, and that's why we had to fast forward to select a Citizens Advisory Task Force to go ahead and meet and comply with all of the requirements so that we could apply in this cycle. So we're going to be way ahead. The task force recommended that we apply for the housing rehabilitation, and they also recommended that we apply for the economic development grant. Now I want to explain briefly the significance of the economic development grant. That's the same type of grant that we had applied for through CDBG for the water plant at the Catalyst site. In that case, we obtained a $3 million grant. And we have now completed the water plant. In fact, just last Friday, we got the approval. In fact, this is good news. We forgot the balloons, but, and the confetti, but DEP has now signed off on our water plant. So we're good to go. All we have to do is open the valve, and we're ready to go. So that's great news. That's been a long time coming. But those of you that were here at the time when we discussed the Community Development Block Grant as a source of potential funding back a few years ago to construct the water plant, the number 86 arrived, and that number 86 employees, full-time employees at the Klausner facility. Prior to that, Klausner had represented in public meetings that they were planning to employ 300-plus employees, full-time employees out there at the sawmill. And that still is their intention. But when we learned that the benchmark number was 86 full-time employees, in order to qualify to apply for this $3 million grant with CDBG, we said, okay, then that's going to be the number, because now we can come back as a phase-in and apply again for CDBG funding to continue, if we need it, with additional infrastructure. And those full-time employees and the numbers will be there to support our application. You've heard me many times in our meetings talk about our need for additional funding for the railroad spur that we have to construct. Well, I'll bring you a fairly exhaustive report on not only that, but some other DOT projects in your next meeting. But suffice it to say that we're probably going to need in the neighborhood of $4 or $5 million total. By the time we build the railroad spur, it's over $4 million. And relocate that primitive crossing on the south end down there next to US 90. That may be another $700,000. So we need a lot more money than we have. The initial funding that we had identified to be applied toward the railroad spur that the county commission is obligated to build for Klausner and for all of those other companies that will be in there, but specifically our development agreement with Klausner says that we will build this railroad spur that will run up the west side of their property within the county buffer. We had identified economic development transportation funding. That was a $3 million grant, and that was used and appropriated for the purpose of reconstructing 169th Road and building new construction, the access road that goes into the Klausner facility. The balance of that funding was to be used or applied toward the railroad spur, albeit we knew at the time that it would not be enough money because DOT couldn't give us any more money at the time, but we already had a number sufficiently higher than what $3 million would construct. So it's my belief that we're going to end up with about 1.3, maybe $1.5 million out of the EDTF to apply toward the railroad spur, and we have about $5 million worth of need. So, Mr. Green, I've indicated several times, is planning to go to Tallahassee with me to talk to the office that handles the Economic Development Transportation Fund to see if we can get additional funding. However, we ran into this legislative issue where everything got postponed. So now the legislature's back, and while Mr. Green and I had hoped that we would be up there talking to them about funding, now we're having to wait until they finish their session and the funding is in place so that we can go with bucket in hand begging for money. And Mr. Green is prepared to do that. However, we do not believe that we will get all of the money that we need. So our backup plan was, and I say this very respectfully, my backup plan as a last resort was actually CDBG funding. And I think that anyone who has ever dealt with this type of grant would have to acknowledge that it is the most bureaucratic-laden funding mechanism that there is. There is nothing more complex, in my opinion. So we need the funding. we will endure that test again. Diana Robinson isn't here tonight, but if she was, when she started that particular grant on the water plant, she was about 5'9". Today, she's about 4'6" at best. But it's very complex, and it requires a lot of attention. And again, I'm thankful for Mr. Fox and his staff that can work with us in getting the application put in. But it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, putting all the pieces of this funding together and making it work. So the Citizens Advisory Task Force has recommended that we proceed with this and the Housing Rehabilitation Grant. And I recommend that we proceed with this as well. So I would ask that the board authorize your staff, administration, and Mr. Fox to go ahead and work together in preparation of these grant applications for these two. There is some other additional information, as Mr. Fox alluded to, that we can bring back to you in the next meeting regarding some criteria associated with the housing rehabilitation. But we can hopefully expedite this thing a little quicker if we can get the nod from the board this evening and go ahead and begin that process.
And just to sort of go into a little more detail, for the housing grant, we're probably looking at publishing a second public hearing ad sometime probably in next week's paper, and then having that at your next meeting. And those all the applications are due June 22nd. Now, the reality is in the housing, neighborhood, and commercial categories, you're going to get more applications than they have money, far more, very competitive. In the economic development category, however, in order for you to apply, you've got to have that business in your back pocket. They've got to commit to create the job, spend a certain amount of money, and those historically have trickled in. And so if they don't, the DEO does not get enough applications between now and the 22nd of June, they will then reopen the cycle, which they've done every year. They've never gotten enough applications in economic development. And then it becomes a first-come, first-served basis. So between now and June 22nd, all the categories are competitive. But if history serves, and we only know of one other application that's being developed that we think is trying to go in, it's not ours, then they will open probably shortly thereafter, actually the next day, where you could submit, and it becomes more of a when you submit the application process on just economic development. The other categories will be closed and all the money be allocated through those applications received between now and the 22nd, and because we're not going to have that economic development application ready for the next meeting. But hopefully shortly thereafter, once we meet with the developer, if he's willing to commit again to the remainder of the jobs and go through the process one more time, we can bring that application to you probably late summer, early fall, something like that. And this cycle will actually, DEO is behind. They've done a rule change, but it took them 3 years and pushed the cycle back 9 months further than where it historically had been. Normally, it's been in the fall of the year. The cycle that's due June 22nd in 2012 was due in October of 12, 9 months earlier. And because it's HUD funds, by the end of this year, they have to have them obligated. So at some point, probably October, November, they will take the de-obligated economic development, the economic development money that has not been committed to, and reallocate that to some additional housing and some additional neighborhood revitalization projects historically. Again, when they get back to their normal cycle, their plan is to have 3 cycles 9 months apart and get them back to a fall cycle in the 4th year. But you're going to have this process. But they basically had 2013 money. This is 2014 money, even though we're in 2015. It's federal 2014 dollars. They really had some additional money left at the end of the 13 cycle, and that cycle lasted 15 months. So we're pretty confident that there will be money available if we come in 2 or 3 months from now with the economic development application.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. So at this time, if the board is happy with the recommendations of the Citizens Advisory Task Force, we would give authorization to develop the application for housing rehabilitation. And then at a future meeting, we'd have the second of the two public hearings. Is that the way?
Yeah, and for the housing, it will be your next meeting.
If that's the wishes of the board, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Wainwright, seconded by Commissioner Fleming. Is there any further discussion?
Quick question, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Wainwright.
Like the economic development grant that we've just completed, we had a named project that went in with that application. Do we have to have, with that housing application, do we have to have designated projects to go in with that application?
No, you actually will, the only thing you will submit is your housing assistance plan, again, which we'll have for you next meeting.
Okay.
And that is going to establish how you will select the homes.
Okay. Now,
But-
on the economic development part, do we have to have a named project for that?
Yeah, you actually have to have the developer.
Same thing as what we went through before?
Yeah, the developer's got to be in your back pocket. You cannot do a speculative project.
Gotcha. Okay. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wainwright. There's a motion and a second as the record reflects. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Harris?
the motion was to proceed on the housing. Is,
Motion was made to proceed as the CTAF recommended.
Recommended. That was both of
Okay.
those.
Would be both of
both
those.
Both.
Right.
fine, okay. Thank you.
All right. Moving back down to general business. We'll go to number 19, discuss with possible board act, well, actually, back up. We pulled those, sorry, number 19 and 20. Move down to item number 21, additional agenda items. I have one, gentlemen, an additional agenda item. Is there any others that would like to be considered at this meeting? Hearing none, I'll read this one into the record. Approve appointment of Franklin White from District 5 to complete the term of A.W. Gaylord on the Zoning Board of Adjustment and Planning and Zoning Board. At this time, I'd like to turn our attention over to Commissioner Wesley Wainwright.
Mr. Chairman, Board, there's a zoning board meeting, I think, later this month. Mr. Gaylord had requested he'd like to retire from that position last month, and been trying to find somebody. And anyway, I found out Thursday this particular individual would be willing to take on this task, and so I hate for the late notice, but we needed to go ahead and get him approved in time to get him up to speed for that zoning, for that next zoning board meeting. Mr. White is owner and operator of Shade Tree Nurseries in McAlpin. Very astute businessman. I think he'll be a tremendous addition to the Zoning Board of Adjustment and Planning.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wainwright. Are there any questions of Mr. Wainwright with regard to this item? Hearing none, what are the wishes of the board?
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Fleming, seconded by Commissioner Gamble. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. Moving on to item number 22, public concerns and comments. I have one. We'll welcome up at this time Kerry S. Waldron. He wants to give us an update on the Community Health Department. Mr. Waldron, you have our attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I am Kerry Waldron. I'm the Administrator for the Florida Department of Health here in Suwannee County in Lafayette. And in 7 days, I'll have been on the job 90 days. And I want to thank y'all for one of the best opportunities I could ever have. It has been quite a pleasure to work with the fine folks that we have at the Health Department. And as a commitment to you to keep you informed and to communicate, I want to take just a moment to update you on some things we're working towards and what we're accomplishing. I have finished my meet and greets with all of our employees, and we have some of the best employees that provide valuable service to this community, and I commend them. They have met the challenge that I've placed before them, and we're having fun at work. And in the process of having fun, we're getting a lot of services completed, and I think that's resonating in the community. One of the areas that we've been very successful in is community outreach. We've done quite a few health fairs. This past Saturday, we were at Walmart for about 4 hours, educating the public on the health department and what all we do and the services that we have to offer, and had quite a few folks that stopped by and visited with us. As part of our Healthiest Weight program, we have challenged our neighboring health departments in Hamilton and Columbia County to a walkathon. We're all walking to Key West in 30 days. So we've picked the month of June to walk 530 miles. We started yesterday. And the winning health departments, which will be Lafayette and Suwannee County, are going to enjoy some type of Jimmy Buffett surprise, cookout, luau, whatever from Hamilton and Columbia. So we've challenged, all of our folks have stepped up and are walking. We're keeping track of how far we walk, and I've even got my little clicker in my pocket. So we're keeping track of our miles, and that's part of our initiative to look at healthy weight. We've also have added as of June the 1st, a day to our environmental health. We'll be adding another day of inspection for our septic tank system. So we'll be doing a Tuesday and Thursday in the south part of the county and a Wednesday and Friday in the north part of the county, which still leaves Monday for us to process applications and take phone calls and field phone calls. But this is adding back to what we're hearing from our contractors, and we're just real excited to be able to expand our services. We are working with Alachua County 1 day a week who has an inspector in our community that's doing facilities inspection. That helps us stay caught up so that we can add a day out in the field. We are working very hard. We have limited staff, so we're trying to maximize our collaborative efforts with our neighboring communities. We are also looking at doing a lunch and learn series and partnering with the school system and the VOTEC to offer a quarterly opportunity that we can come together as a community, have a very healthy lunch, and then learn and be educated about healthy living, healthy choices, and things of that nature. And we met today with the food service folks here for the school system, and they're very excited about us kicking that program off in the fall of the year. And the other item I want to mention to you is our dental program. We have the opportunity to add 2 days to our dental service program, a day here in Suwannee and 1 day in Lafayette. We have the opportunity to work with a dentist in another health department who is only working 3 days a week and like to pick up 2 additional days, and we need that service. We have more kids that we can see than we have a dentist to be able to perform the services with. So we're meeting with them to work out the details to have 4 days here in Suwannee, and that would allow us to have 3 days in Lafayette. And so we're really excited about what's happening at the health department, really excited about the role that our folks are playing in the community. They're excited about work, and when they're excited, that parlays in the service they provide, and I think that the folks that we serve walk away well served. And I want to pass out a little brochure. I'm not above shameless marketing, but we do have our services listed, and we pass this out. We also have the brochure in Spanish so that we can meet the needs of that community. And my administrative assistant, Ms. Melinda Scott, helped compile this brochure. It's current about what services we offer. I want to leave a copy with you so when someone asks you a question, I don't want you to say, well, we don't know. Well, let me get my little cheat sheet and I can tell you. Hang on a second. This is also on our website. If you know of any group that needs a speaker, I'll be more than happy to come and discuss with them what we're doing, the services that we're providing. We did have one of our nurses and our healthiest weight coordinator go out and do a safety seminar with the Suwannee Valley Electric and about 51 linemen this past month. So that's part of our outreach effort to get back out into the community and let folks know what's going on. And last, you'll be getting a phone call from Ms. Scott. You may have received my letter asking for an opportunity to meet individually with each of you. I'd like to have you come out to the health department at 915 Nobles Ferry Road. Spend some time to see what we're doing. Let me talk to you and hear what your thoughts are about how we can expand services and meet the needs of our community. So when she calls you, check your calendar and see when you'd be available, because I look forward to spending some time one-on-one with you. And if you come this month, we'll let you help us walk to Key West. So bring your clicker.
Thank you, Mr. Waldron.
Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I was going to ask, is there any questions of Mr. Waldron by the board? Hearing none.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Waldron.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Waldron has been very vocal and communicative with the board members, I think. That's a nice change from the past, so thank you for that once again. Move on to item number 23, administrators' comments and information. We'll turn our attention to Mr. Randy Harris.
I'll be very brief.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to say that publicly that I first applaud Paula for handling something spur of the moment for us, and apologizing again to her for calling it last minute. Last evening, we needed someone to keep minutes in the Citizen Advisory Task Force meeting. We spent a lot of time scrambling, trying to put the task force together. I know we spoke to all the commissioners and we're back and forth trying to put all that together. We were scrambling, trying to get the advertisements out for all the hearings and make sure that everything was put together. And in the 12th hour, realized that we didn't have anyone to keep minutes for us. So I called Paula. I didn't have to bow and burn incense or anything. She was Johnny on the spot, said, "I'll handle it for you." And she did, and I really appreciate that. So that's why you have minutes this evening reflecting what occurred in that Citizens Advisory Task Force yesterday evening. So thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Moving on to item number 24, board members' inquiries, requests, and comments. Who would like to start this evening?
I don't have any.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Mr. Sessions?
Just remind everybody about the Blueberry Festival Saturday.
Mr. Wainwright?
Actually, I don't have any, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
I got just one question. I didn't think of it while Mr. Fox, you were up there speaking a while ago, but I'm going to ask it now. You said that Live Oak and Brantford, we can't do anything within the city or the town, but they can apply on their own.
Yeah, I don't work with Live Oak, but I do work with Brantford. Brantford's been doing their sewer plant project. I think everybody's familiar with the problems they've had out there with the sinkholes. They actually applied before they had the sinkholes, but then since they had the sinkholes, we've actually obtained an additional $400,000, $200,000 from Water Management District, and then $200,000 from a state appropriation last year, on top of the CDBG grant to work on the sewer plant. They will finish that project in the next few weeks, actually, and then they'll probably be looking at not this cycle, but the next cycle, they'll be applying for a CDBG.
Okay. I was just wondering if you was working with any of them.
Yeah, I'm not working with Live Oak, but I do work with Brantford.
We'll work on that.
Thank
you.
Go ahead, Mr. Campbell. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. All right, I don't have anything either. I'm trying to get home and get better. Other than that, I just need one thing, gentlemen.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Gamble.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Sessions. All in favor, say that again?
Aye.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Y'all drive safe.
Randy.